Okay, this is for the video on the Double Helix experience, and I'm going to take us to a site where concernforpeople.info, and here under the brain, under experience Double Helix, I'm going to show you this, and you can see this is about an experience that happened to me about around 1977, before much was known about the double helix. And I was sitting in my apartment one day, and I had a fever. I had the flu in the winter time in Portland, Oregon, and as I always did every year, I always got the flu. Now I get vaccine, fortunately, and this was back in '77, and so this is now 40 years later. They've developed very good flus, and so I don't get flu vaccines, and so I don't get flu in wintertime anymore. And so this is very nice. But in any case, I just happened to be sitting on the couch one day, and I had this fever. It was about 101, and nothing. I've never been delusional from fever. I've had a fever as high as 104 when I was like in the 7th grade, but I've never been delusional. And I wasn't on drugs or hypnotism or any kind of fur. I was just relaxing, staying home, tending to nursing my flu. And as I was sitting there, I just had this. I guess you could kind of say it was kind of like virtual reality, except that it was just slightly inside my forehead, and there was just kind of like this space, and in the center of the space, floating there, was a double helix, and I had really never heard or much about the double helix that had been discovered, but I was aware of something called the double helix had been discovered. But here it was floating there, and going up maybe a turn or so, and it was a dull blue, and there were the connecting arms, branches between each arm going up, as you well know now, the structure of the helix. And then at the base of this segment of what I was seeing, there was on one of the arms, there was a bright white dot. It wasn't brilliant. It was just bright. It was just a bright, much brighter than the kind of like the faded blue of the arms, and it started going up the arm, and when it came to a branch, the connecting branch, the connecting branch would light up for just so 1, 2, 3, and it would go on to the next one, and that former branch would fade back into normal, and then the next branch where this bright dot would light up just like previously, would just go across. It would it would just light up. The bright dot did not go across the connecting branch. The bright dot stayed on the arm, while the branch that was connecting branch was lighting up and quit. And when the dot went on to the next one, the dot did not fade in intensity. It remained the same intensity as it traveled up the arm to the next connecting branch. And this continued to go up, and something was very curious was happening. I had a childhood that was extremely traumatic. It was just absolutely terrible. It is so impossible to relate to you what it was from birth until the end of high school, when I was able to leave home my parents were not together. They'd been apart for about 10, 15 years or so, but I had this difficulty, and I was trying to work this out, and it was kind of like a knot or a black hole, and this knot, as these branches, connecting branches, were lighting up and fading out, and this bright dot would go up to the next one. Each successive branch that it went up, this pane or knot or whatever was dissolving, just right along with the progress that this bright dot was making its way up the arm, and these connecting branches were lighting up one by one and then fading out as the bright dot moved on up the arm. And this was very interesting because I don't recall how this ended, but the progress that was made in melting away this, and it was a very significant, I would say like about 80% of the problem that I was feeling, that was retained. So this wasn't a momentary thing of just, some release of stress or something. This was a permanent change for the rest of my life. I'm now 70. This would have been back about when I was 77. I would have been 40 years old then. No, it's about right. And so it has remained, and it has never reversed. So I thought this was very interesting because it brings up some questions. Where this DNA molecule, where in the brain was it located? And where did this bright dot that apparently had some correcting information, where did this bright dot, correcting molecule, where did it come from? And where in the brain was that correcting dot made? Where was that correcting molecule? Where was it made? And the location of where it was made, how did that manufacturing location know that this particular double helix molecule someplace else in the brain needed correcting? How did it get information that it was, and also that it was time to send this molecule, this correcting molecule, to the location of the double helix? Well, these are very interesting questions. But this 40 years ago, it wouldn't have made much sense to anybody. And I knew that. But, I've waited, and now I'm seeing in the news of many DNA modifying attempts and improvements and effects of modified genes and DNA, and we see the stem cells that are being created from fat cells to go in and correct structures such as liver and spinal cord, etc., etc. And we're getting very close to doing exactly what I envisioned with this virtual reality back in 1977. Today is August 4th, 2018. So if you run across this, you might find it interesting, and you might know somebody who might find it interesting. And also, finally, this fever could well have, maybe it wasn't the flu. It may well have been that circumstances were created. In other words, this site in my brain that manufactured correcting molecules may have initiated a rise in temperature of my body in order to facilitate the correcting process. It may be a symptom that the correcting process was being done. This is another interesting question. I know for fevers, I've used the sweat lodge technique just personally in my bed under my covers and getting hot and sweating and for a number of hours, and it helps the fevers quite a bit. But this was not what was happening. I was not sweating or feeling feverish or anything. I was just sitting on a couch, in the middle of the day, 10 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, or something. And so this is just a report. This is just a report on what happened, and you can read this on this. You can read this on the website. If you go to the brain and you go to experience Double Helix, you'll see there are a number of experiences. But here's the experiences. There are a number of experiences here that are very interesting regarding the brain that I've had. And this is one, experience Double Helix. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can find under here on this website, and you can see my email address right here at the bottom, ShawnHiggins888@yahoo.com. And if you have any questions or communications you want to make, feel free to contact me.